this video, we're going to be creating our input for Comfy UI. So this is going to be an abstract animation that is going to act as the foundation for the movement for our Comfy UI animation. So I'm going to start out with just a cube. It will be good to know some of the basics of Blender for this part of the tutorial. I'm going to be doing things like, grabbing, rotating, extruding, creating loop cuts. So it just might be good to get some foundational understanding beforehand. So I'm starting out with a cube here, and I'm just going to start off by creating some loop cuts. I'm going to grab some faces here and extrude them just around the shape. I'm not really going for anything in particular. I'm just stretching and changing the shape to be something interesting and dynamic that will be a good shape that I can animate and use as a reference in Comfy. Do another loop cut there. Some more face extrusion. Now I think we've got an interesting shape here that we can do some stuff with. So now we'll go back to object mode, go to our modifiers here. Let's add a modifier. I think what I'll do is use a generate remesh. And what I love about this modifier is it really transforms the shape as you change the voxel size. It's great for getting ideas and just creating some abstract shapes. We'll get a subdivision surface on here next to kind of smooth things out a little bit as well. So we've got a pretty cool shape going on here. I think this is a great starting point. I'm going to go ahead and apply the modifiers that I have now so that they are a part of the actual mesh, the actual geometry that we're working with. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this now. Because these are going to be two different objects. So let's some rotation, move it around a little bit, and just differentiate it from the shape below it. And just kind of thinking about that composition. So now with this bottom one, I'm going to go ahead and add another modifier. I think what I'll do here is a simple deform. Simple deform is great because it transforms the shape further. It adds these bends and twists, stretches, tapers, and you can kind of stack these along with other transformations and find some really cool forms. Now here, nothing really has to be perfect. I'm just kind of loosely thinking about, what is appealing to my eye. How will these shapes interact? How far apart should they be? How different should they be? And so I'm just going to use a couple different deform modifiers and make these shapes unique in their own way. All right, so that's really nice. I really like that almost cylindrical curve that we have going on there. I think that'll be really interesting, and that particular deformer could be useful for when we actually start doing our simple animations in this scene. This is looking pretty good, and I think it's time to add another mesh here. So we'll go with an icosphere. So I'm going to do the icosphere, but I'm going to pick some different options. So I'm going to go into the little menu that pops up down here, and I'll just change it a little bit so it's a simpler shape. Move this out of the way. Now I'm I know there are probably some more efficient ways to do this in Blender, but this is kind of just the way that I work, and it kind of works for me. I use Blender mostly as this like abstract factory to make interesting animations that I can use. So what I'm going to use here is this free Blender plugin that I like to use called Maze Mesh. I think it might just be called Maze on the Blender plugin library. It's free and it's really cool to see it kind of transform shapes. You can do pretty crazy stuff with it. I think right now I just want to make this shape here a bit more interesting and have some more geometry to work with because that will allow us to create some more intricacies when we start doing our rendering in Comfy UI. So the more nice little shapes and nuance we can have in our base animation, the more interesting things we're going to see, the more life we're going to kind of see be created when we're working in Comfy UI. This is a pretty good shape, so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it, rotate it a bit, and I think having these two shapes kind of similar but doing different things will benefit the composition a bit. Add a little bit of balance, a little bit of perspective with a larger and smaller form, so that'll work well, along with a torus here. Go ahead and scale this up a bit. We'll go ahead and do a subdivide surface and shade it smooth. So that way it's got that nice smooth surface. It's more like a ring. We'll just see how that fits in the composition. I think it's pretty interesting. Duplicate it as well, and yeah, I'll just mess with these and just find an interesting way that these shapes can all work together nicely. Alright, so now I'm going to select all, move them more into the center because that's where I'm going to make my camera. And that's looking pretty good. So now I'm selecting the plane, and I'm going to go ahead and make the floor and the backdrop for the animation here. So it's not just floating in space, and there's a field of view that we can work with. So I'll go ahead and grab the edge here, extrude it on Y, then grab it again on Z, and then I'm going to create a bevel here. Use my scroll wheel and kind of smooth this out a little bit because I don't want a sharp corner back there. We kind of want this infinity curve for this animation to live on, just so we have that depth behind it. Now we have this nice smooth backdrop, just a subtle amount of depth, right? It's exactly what we want. I'm going to scale this up quite a bit. It might be a little bit too much, kind of starts breaking things, but what I can do is I can select our objects here, and I can shrink these down a bit as well, so that'll help us out. Again, I'm sure there's always more efficient ways to do all of this. This is just kind of how I work and play when I'm messing around in Blender, creating these basic animations. All right, so now I think I want a shape for the background, so I'll do the torus. This is another free add-on with Blender. It's extra mesh options, so I have that on and installed, and it gives me these different options of torus that work really well for creating movement. They're just very complex shapes already off the bat. And I'll usually put one of these in the background to help, facilitate movement in the animation. And you'll see how that works. Already you can kind of tell just having it back there, it really changes the composition. And once we bring our camera in, it becomes more apparent. So now we got something going here. I think there's enough elements to bring in our camera. So I'll set my view to camera. All right, should be already good. There. Let's go up here to view, active camera. There we go. So now with that option on in that right panel, I am able to control the camera with my mouse, just as I would just moving around the scene, which is really great for how I work. I can also go in here and set up the camera to have the output resolution that I'll want for the piece. So this is perfect for me to set up my shot really intuitively. Something else I like to do here is go into my camera settings and adjust my focal length. This just creates a much more dynamic view of things. It really makes things feel like they're coming out at you. And I think it also works well since this is kind of a macro themed project that should work well for this. So again, I just want to make sure that I'm not getting the rim of our background scene there. So I think I'm gonna see what I can do about that. Size everything down a bit more and zoom in again. I think I'm actually going to rotate the background a bit there. Just get rid of that upper edge. Yeah, now I think I have plenty of space that I can work with here. Just adjusting the toroid in the background. I want it to work how I need it to work for the composition. So I'm going to make some adjustments to it here. And the subdivide and shade smooth, just to get rid of all those edges, because that's information that I won't really need. We'll shade these smooth as well, so they're those nice abstract shapes. That's really nice. I think this is almost perfect to get started with animating. All right, so what we'll do now is we'll drag from our bottom corner there, and we'll just have a new menu down here, and we'll switch this to our timeline. And this is where I can start drawing the animations. Except now I need my other menu, so I'll grab another corner here, and I'll bring up the properties, I believe. Yes, here we go. So now we have our properties panel, and I can add modifiers, and now I can animate these modifiers on the timeline as well. So I'll start off with my favorite one, a simple to form, and I'll just play with the form and see if I find some transformations that I think will make for an interesting animation. So I'll go ahead and right click and set a keyframe there, and you can see there on my timeline that that keyframe has shown up. So now I can work from that keyframe onto the next one, and that'll be the start of my animation process. So I'll go to frame 60 here, and I'll change that value and add another keyframe. And now that transformation is going to go across the whole timeline. So I'll do another keyframe there. So I can just press that diamond. Then I'll grab my keyframes at the front, copy paste them to the last frame, and now we have a fully looping animation. So after this, we're kind of going to go through and just stack these animations until everything is moving and flowing and we get some really interesting stuff going. So now I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a bit. As you can see, you can animate the location, rotation, and scale of the objects as well. Everything's kind of keyframeable. So you can go through and just move things to the next position however you'd like, just making sure to copy and paste that first keyframe and put it on the last frame as well. So that way everything you're doing will eventually loop back perfectly. The camera is also able to be keyframed in its position, scale, and everything, so that's really nice as well. So now we have our animation done and we're ready to get into some shading. So here we can start to pick out the materials and textures that we want for all the objects in our animation. I have a plugin here called Blender Kit. It is very useful. It even has meshes ready to go that you can use as well. But right now I'm going to go through here and I'm going to use the materials library and just see what I can find here by searching. Starting with gold. I think these rings should be gold. That makes sense to me. It's giving antique vibes. I think down here for these blobs, do something like a fabric or cloth pattern. I think that could be really nice. Let's go through, yeah, something floral like that. So now down here, I'm going to go to my shader editor and I'm going to adjust this texture here on one of these nodes. I think it's the mapping here. No, not here. Usually, here we go. So up here, I can adjust the scale of the pattern, which is really cool. And I think I want this to be as blown up kind of as possible, because we don't want too small forms going on, but we also want big enough forms to kind of influence what's going to happen once we're in Comfy UI. So the more different shapes and colors that the models have to work with, the more they can kind of paint in and create things. So I think that's a good balance, and it's definitely working really well during our animation. So, all right, now we'll find a different texture for this piece back here. Do something more like stone. Oh, that's really nice. So we're also keeping in mind here how these colors and textures are going to work together. We want to have a variety going on. So for one of these, go for like a sapphire, maybe. See if we can find some jewel tones of some kind. Alright, so now we have a lot of nice options. Just try these out, see how the colors work. This one's got a lot of color. I think that could be nice actually. A pop of color that'll probably change a bit in hue as it rotates and moves around. I think that could be really useful for our composition. So we'll have that as well. And now I have the plane selected because I'm going to go over here and actually just do a base color change for our background. I don't think we need any texture or anything on there. We just need a background color that will be a nice contrast with our front composition. All right, we've got a good color here. I might switch out this material. It's just a little bit, it might be a little bit too much of a wild card here. I still want things to be balanced and somewhat subtle, so I'm going to go ahead and find a different material I can use. Okay, I think this one works really nicely with the rest of the colors that I have going on. Yeah, I think that'll be nice. Goes well with the blue as well. Okay, and I might adjust the background again. All right, I think this light blue, almost white, is going to work well because what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new simple material for this toroid, and I'll do a darker blue. So that way I'm creating this kind of abstract light blue and dark blue background. And that'll be good for creating movement, but also being separate from the main elements that are up front. Okay, so now it's time to go to our render settings, and as we'll see, it's very dark because what we need to do is we need to add some lighting, and a great way to do that is actually with HDRIs within BlenderKit. So I found one here that's working well. And now I'll go down here and I have my shaders panel open still, and I might just adjust the strength a bit. Make the scene just a little bit brighter. Scrub through our animation a little bit, just see if it's working for the composition. No, I think I'm actually going to change this texture because it's a little bland. I'd like to get something a little bit more saturated, maybe. Maybe something like that. Yeah, that's much better. Definitely pops more. I think it even brings all of our colors together as well. That's really nice. So now we'll just get our output set up. We'll make sure that I have my file going to the right place. I'm going to choose the FFmpeg video, and then down in encoding, I will make sure to select MP4. Do high quality here. Keep this as good. Now remember, this isn't a final render. This is going to be a video input. It's going to be a reference. So it's kind of going to be taken apart by the various processes and control nets and turned into something new. And so now we'll go ahead and render our animation. So now we have our final render here. I love the colors, I love the movement, the camera angles. I think everything here is working really well. It's all a bit uniform, so I might go into After Effects here and chop this up and find some more interesting moments. So over here in After Effects, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to duplicate our video over and over and transition into different parts of it as I kind of manipulate and transform the video itself. So over here, I'll make 3 duplicates and I'll just move them along the timeline. And I'm going to overlap them just a little bit because they're going to transition to each other. So I'm taking this second layer now, this second copy, and I'm just going to find a different part of it. What I'm kind of doing is taking this original video and adding some variety with some rotation, some scaling, and yeah, just finding new pockets. So I found a nice bit of contrast here with the forms. So what I'm going to do is in this first layer, when that second clip starts, I'm going to automate the opacity from 100 to 0. And what that's going to allow me to do is kind of do this fade transition between those two different sections of the clip. And that's really the only mechanic I'm really using here. So I'm mostly using rotate, stretching, zooming, and just simple transformations, and then doing that opacity to weave between the different parts of the clips. All right, so I've got about 6 different layers here of me kind of fading between these different parts of the clip. And we still have a perfectly looping composition that we can bring into Comfy UI, and we'll actually have further moments of transformation and these changes in scenery because of these fading transitions between the different parts of the clip. So those little fades that we're doing are actually going to help feed the model as it repaints the scene. So now we can jump into the next video and get started with Comfy and kind of see how all of this works together.